and I'm going to tell you all about fractions. In this video, I will cover parts of a fraction, what a fraction represents, different forms, mixed numbers and improper fractions, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions, and changes among fractions, decimals, and percents. Before I tell you all about them, let's go over what a fraction actually is. A fraction is a part of a whole, or a number written with a bottom part telling you how many parts the whole is divided into, and the top part telling you how many you have. Parts of a fraction. There are two parts to every fraction, the numerator and the denominator. The numerator is the number on top, or otherwise known as a fraction, and the denominator is the bottom number, and also known as the whole number. What a fraction represents. A fraction represents part of a whole. For example, this pizza. This is only part of a whole, because there's 8 ninths, but this is 9 over 9, a whole. 8 ninths, 9 over 9. Part of a whole, the whole. Different forms of a fraction. Every fraction has a different form. Sometimes it is bigger and sometimes it is smaller. Here are some examples. So say you had to give two different forms of the fraction for 6. Now, there are multiple answers to this problem. You can make it 2 times bigger by multiplying it by 2 over 2, or you can reduce it by 2 over 2. So, there are two different forms for most fractions. You can reduce it or enlarge it most of the times. Mixed numbers and improper fractions. A positive number that can be written as a sum of a whole number equal to or greater than 1 and a fraction is a mixed number. Examples, 1 3/5 or 9 11/12. You may get a problem where it says write the number as an improper fraction. Say you had 2 1/5. You would multiply the 5 by the 2 first, and you get 10, and then you'd add the 1, which is 11/5 as your answer. A fraction that is equal to or greater than 1 is an improper fraction. Example, 15 over 2, 16 over 25, all those. You may be asked to write the improper fraction as a mixed number. You have 11 over 7. You would divide the 11 by 7, and you'd get 1 4/6, because there's the 4 left over when you subtract the 11 by 7.
1 4/7, right?
Moving on. Adding and subtracting fractions. When adding and subtracting fractions, you always have to have the same denominator. Say this was your problem, 3/10 and 2/5. First, you would have to check if they are the same denominator, which they are not. Since they're not the same, you have to multiply 2/5 by a 1. We are looking at number 4. Multiply by the 1, 2 over 2. The 1 is going to be 2 over 2, since 5 times 2 is 10, which would make 2/5 and 3/10 have the same denominator. When you have a mixed number problem, you have to line up the numbers. Example, if you say you had 3 1/5 plus 8 3/5, you would have to line them up like this. Looking at number 5, how they are lined up. Okay, and then another one, it's the same for subtracting. We can line them up. Say you had 12 and 2/10 minus 10 and 5/10. Look at number 6. You would have to borrow from that since there is not enough, since you can't do 2/10 minus 5/10. You would make the 12 11 and then you would add 10 over 10 since the fraction is out of 10. Moving on. Multiplying and dividing fractions. When multiplying fractions, you do not need common denominators. All you have to do is multiply across. Example, 3/5 times 4/10. You would do, looking at number 7, you would just multiply that across and get 12 over 50, and then you would divide it to simplify it. When you divide, it's different. You have to multiply it by the reciprocal. A reciprocal is two numbers whose products are 1. They are also known as multiplicative inverse. For example, if you have 5/10 divided by 2/5, looking at number 8, you would multiply by the reciprocal. Then you get your answer. Changes among fractions, decimals, and percents. Fractions can be changed into decimals and percents. To change it into a decimal, you can either divide or you can try to make the denominator out of 10 or 100, which sometimes is not possible. And then you would put it as a decimal. Example, if you were dividing, let's say you had 3/5 and you had to make it a decimal. You would do 3 divided by 5, make it a decimal, and you would get 0.6. Sometimes they will divide evenly, but sometimes they will have a terminating decimal, which goes on forever. 0.6 is also 6/10, which can be simplified by 2 over 2, which is a 1. And it would be 3/5, which is what we started with. That's how you would check it. And that's how you make a fraction into a decimal. When you're changing decimals into percents, you have to make the decimal into a fraction first. So 0.5 would be 5 over 10. And to make it out of 100, you would have to multiply it by 10 over 10. And it would be 50 over 100. 50 over 100 is also 50%, since the percent sign means out of 100. When you have to change fractions into percents, if it could go into 100 evenly, it's fine. But if it can't, you have to try simplifying it first, then trying to make it out of 100. And then once you have it out of 100, and say you had 20 out of 100, it would just be 20% since it's out of 100. Looking at number 10, it would just be 20%. When you change percents into fractions, you just put it out of 100, so 26%, 26 over 100, just another example. So it's the same, but it's flip-flop. If when you're changing percents into fractions, it would just be 26 over 100 if you had 26%. Decimals to fractions. Say you had 0.25, so 0.25, which is 25 hundredths. You see what place it is in the decimal, and you make it into a fraction. So if you had 25 hundredths, it would be 25 out of 100, since the 5 is in the hundredths place. And 0.2 would be 2/10, since the 2 is in the tenths place. Percent to decimal. Say you had 22% and you'd first make it into a fraction. Percent means over 100 once again, so it would be 22 over 100. And the decimal would be 0.22, because when you say it, it's 22 hundredths. 22 over 100, 22 hundredths. Decimal to fraction. When you have a decimal to a fraction, all you have to do is say it. Say you had 35 hundredths, 0.35. You would just say 35 over 100, because all you have to do is say it. That just about summarizes fraction. Thanks for listening. Bye.